So good morning, everyone. How are you? Very good. It's an exciting day because we have traditional signage technology meeting digital signage or new media technology all in one place. And I think it's really a neat opportunity for both people coming from the traditional static signage industry to get into digital signage market. For us, and the sort of on the fringes of the digital signage market, to understand sort of how the static signage market works, because the distribution and the way the products are delivered is very different. So I think it's a really cool opportunity for us to be here and kind of see it. So I encourage you not only to go to the Alamo show floor, but also to the INC floor so you can see the difference. There's a big movement, obviously, within all the signage, segments of signage, to move into the world of digital signage. And some of the statistics I'll give you today, and some of the things we'll talk about today, will sort of explain why that's happening. But first of all, how many of you are in digital signage right now, or doing digital signage at some level? That's great. So about 75% of you. Now, what's great about that is 2 years ago for Alamo, we went around and did a digital signage tour where we went around the country to about 5 or 6 locations around the country. I want to say it was in 2012, maybe it was 2011, I don't remember which year it was. And what we did was talk about how the best way for AV integration companies to get into digital signage, and the best numbers we had raised their hand in all those sessions was maybe 20% of the people. So it's clear that people are moving into, integrators are moving into the world of digital signage now, and that's great. Now the question is, what elements of digital signage are you doing, and are you taking advantage of all the parts of digital signage that you could take advantage of? So today I'm going to cover sort of the basics of digital signage. For those of you who don't really understand digital signage, this will kind of give you like the A, B's, and C's. For those of you who do understand digital signage, this will sort of be a review, but also maybe we'll talk about some of the elements that maybe you're not as familiar with yourself. We'll talk about the integration process, the creative side of digital signage, and then the opportunities, because the opportunities are really where the money is. So digital signage is one of the fastest growing segments of AV. The only other segment of AV that's growing faster than digital signage, percentage-wise, is the worship market. So if you take a look at like churches and places like that, they're putting in AV, that's the fastest growing segment percentage-wise. But from a dollar standpoint, this is the fastest growing segment of the AV technology. Anybody want to take a guess at how big the AV, the digital signage market is? Just digital signage, not and this is just the United States, by the way. We're not going to talk about other elements of signage, just digital signage. Take a guess. Anyone want to throw out a number? 1.5 billion, 2 billion? Okay, so let me give you a couple of numbers. So the education AV industry, so the amount of products sold into the education AV industry. So if you take a look at all the hardware and software products sold through AV into K through 12 and higher education, okay, is about $8.6 billion. Okay? Digital signage is $9.2 billion. So the digital signage market is already larger than the 30-year-old AV market of people selling to education markets. So we almost have a $10 billion market now of digital signage. So in just 10 years, the market's not barely 10 years old. The market is already bigger than a 25, 28-year-old market that's been around for a long time. We all identify with selling to K through 12 and higher education. So if we identify with that, then we should be able to identify with digital signage. The question is, what elements of that are you selling? Also, with the growth rate, if the current growth rate holds, which it appears that it is, we're getting pretty heavy-duty double-digit growth rate every year in the ranges of 15 to 20% a year in digital signage, whereas most elements of the traditional AV channels are growing in the range of, say, 5 to maybe 10% in pretty good years. Based on our current growth rate, we're going to be a $25 billion market in 5 years. So we're not very far off from being a huge segment of audiovisual technology. But there are different elements of digital signage, and most likely, most of you are only doing 2 parts, not all 4 parts. So we'll talk about what those other parts are. And obviously, the applications for digital signage, I'm sure you're familiar with retail. We see digital signage all the time in retail. We walk through a mall. If you just think about walking through a mall 3 years ago, walking through a mall now, how many more digital signage displays you see? It's been exponential growth, not linear growth. It's all of a sudden they've appeared everywhere. And of course, corporate, for informational purposes, hospitality, wayfinding is a big segment of the market. There's not a single higher education facility that isn't either budgeting for a digital signage project or wants to have digital signage, and they just don't know how to pay for it. So let's talk about some of the basics. Ultimately, everything is generated, run, and managed by something called a CMS, okay, a content management system. And it's not much different than any other sort of CMS or content management system, but that's sort of the key thing. That content management system is what you do your creative in many cases. It doesn't have to be. You can do creative in Adobe Suites. You can do creative in PowerPoint, for that matter, if you really wanted to have a real basic digital signage. But ultimately, that content management system is what resides either on the network or in the cloud and sends content to all the displays when you want it sent to the displays and the type of content you want sent to the displays. So obviously with a group like this, I don't have to go through and kind of map out what a digital signage display looks like. We've seen it, right? Sometimes it's just full screen ads. Sometimes it is screens that are chopped up into quadrants that have stuff like CNN playing, but also a ticker tape going down, and also an ad for Coca-Cola on the side. Things like that. So to do that, to put those elements together, that content management system does that. And there's also a person that basically ultimately runs that as the content manager. And that's sort of like that key element, right? Now the stuff that we obviously know, you need a display, right? You obviously know we need a display. And we need a network to connect the things together, so now we have this content management system that's connected to the network. And when we've designed a digital signage system, we've got to deploy the digital signage system, we've got to manage the digital signage system, and we have to monitor the digital signage system, and the content management system does all that. So that CMS allows you to design your content, allows you to deploy the content, meaning sending it where you want it to send, allows you to manage the content, i.e. it's proactive at telling you if a single display is off. It's proactive at telling you what's on each individual display. It also has the capability of being proactive enough to tell you who's looking at the display. If you use certain CMS systems, for example, can recognize if it's a male or female and approximate age, how long they stared at the screen. It also has the ability to manage the interactivity of a screen. So, for example, if you're using touch system displays and you want to integrate that into a CMS system, the combination of the two will give you all sorts of analytics of how many people actually interacted with the display. And then, of course, it allows you to monitor it. Now, what's neat about these is all four of these are profit centers for your organization. You got to think about that. So I want you to back up now that I've told you sort of what that CMS does. You can charge for the design, the creative design, the layout. You can charge for deploying it. That's hang and banging stuff, right? I mean, that's not that complicated. This is not full-on systems integration. The nice thing about digital signage is like hanging and banging anything, but the negative part of digital signage is if that's all you're in the market for, you're not going to make a whole lot of money. So that's only one element. That allows you to manage it, and you can charge for that management services. A university doesn't want to manage that kind of stuff. They just want it to operate. And allows you to monitor, meaning you can charge for proactive monitoring services, just like extended service contract, proactive remote maintenance contracts, things like that. So these are all chargeable services within digital signage. So what it does is, in the world of digital signage, the percentage of service to hardware is much higher. So in the world of a traditional AV install, boardroom, conference room, training room, right, that's 18% approximately of service. Industry-wide average, and approximately 82% is hardware. So in the digital signage world, it can be anywhere from 40 to 60% is services. And of course, services margin-wise are a lot higher than hardware. Hardware margins are anywhere from 6 to 15%. Service margins are anywhere from 15 to 90%, depending on what services that you are actually providing. So ultimately, that network is made up of more than one display. Now, of course, if you're doing a dentist's office, a doctor's office, and all they're doing is putting a display in the lobby, that's one thing. But there's a whole lot of dentists that have realized that they have that one in the lobby. Why not put one on the ceiling when they're doing services to everybody? They're able to shoot ads at them, but also entertain them with headphones so they're not hearing the sound of that awful drill drilling into their teeth. And same with doctor's offices. How long do you use? You go to the doctor, you're like, God, how long do I have to sit in the waiting room? And you're only out there 3 minutes. You're like, awesome, this is going to be awesome. They're going to take me right back to the room. Yes, Mr. Kayye, go to room number 3. And then now you're in room number 3 for 25 minutes. And you're like, did you forget about me? Should I put my head out in the hall to let them know I'm still here? Is my chart on the door? What's the problem? You could have digital signage in there, and basically that's an eyeball that you're capturing attention for. And statistically, obviously, you're going to make a connection both from an advertising standpoint and also from a sales standpoint. So that CMS system needs a player. Some device has to send that content to that display. And this is an example of one. Brightsign is the company that makes a digital signage player. There's a lot of companies out there. You'll see companies here today that make digital signage players. And ultimately, all it is a device that has an RS-232 connection, a network connection, and an HDMI or a VGA connection. Pretty much it. It's really small, and all it does is sit behind the monitor. And in the case of companies like Samsung, for example, they've integrated digital signage players into the monitor, so you don't even need to have the external digital signage player. You don't have to have that content player actually in the network itself. The digital signage networks ultimately can display anything. They're not limited to just PowerPoint presentations or just content from a laptop. They have the capability of displaying any content that you want. So for example, you can pay AccuWeather $1 a month for a widget to have the AccuWeather as a block somewhere on your monitor. So you're going to pay $1 a month times however many places you put that AccuWeather widget. So if it's a university and you have 100 monitors, you're going to pay $100 a month to put it on all those monitors. Or you can get it for free if you're willing to have the AccuWeather logo on it. So you can have weather that doesn't have a branded weather, and then you can have weather that has branded weather that you get for free. So you charge your customer however you want, but those widgets basically are either ad embedded or not ad embedded, because ultimately they want to make money as well. But ultimately, anything you can think of that is on the network, meaning on the internet, can be put on a display. And those content management systems from all the companies that make content players, digital signage players, all have content management systems, all have the capability of allowing you to leverage any kind of content you can imagine on the internet. That includes connecting to your own social media sites. So one of the biggest trends in digital signage is moving towards interactivity, because statistically what we've seen is that when you give somebody the ability to interact with a display, they're going to pay attention to it longer. They're going to look at it longer. And ultimately, that's what the advertiser wants. They want somebody, they like the person noticing the ad that goes splashing right there, but they want the person to engage with the ad. And if the person's engaged with the ad, then you get much better memory recall, and you can sort of, analytics-wise, you can prove that there was an ROI on something like that. So you're seeing a lot of movement towards interactivity. So pay attention. I mentioned one company already, Touch Systems. They're here on the floor. Pay attention to all the companies out there that are introducing interactivity. Again, the content management systems have the ability to manage that. So you can take the same network and make half the displays touch sensitive and half the displays not touch sensitive, and still have similar content on both. You just don't want to ask somebody to come up and touch something that is not supposed to be touched. And also, part of interactivity doesn't mean you actually have to physically touch it. Part of it could be noticing who's walking by and then sending messaging to that person, or knowing who's likely to walk by based on time of day. So for example, if a digital signage display is sitting in an airport baggage claim area, we know the kind of people that are there versus the kind of people that are already at the gate, right? Because in the baggage claim area, the whole public can be there. But in the gate area, it's only people that are actually flying. So for American Airlines to advertise American Airlines in the gate area would be a dumb idea, because you're already getting ready to fly. So what's the point of advertising? But for American Airlines to advertise American Airlines in the baggage claim area would be a good idea, because you not only have the people who just flew, who may or may not have had a good experience with Delta, but also you have the people who are picking people up, and you can leverage that kind of content. So, and we have the ability to pull content from this sort of imaginary cloud. The word cloud's been sort of the new version of the word internet. Is probably the best way to describe it. Ultimately, it just means that there's some content sitting somewhere, we don't know exactly where, in the internet world, in the interweb, and most people are calling it cloud-based content. And it's all screens are now being connected to the cloud, i.e., all screens have integrated either Ethernet capability or Wi-Fi capability in them. That means that they're connected to the cloud all the time, which means that all screens can be turned into digital signage screens. It allows it for a lot more seamless experience and a lot less complication from a design integration standpoint. And we've gone from, if you look at the market 4 years ago, we had about 8 to 10% of the monitors connectable to the internet, whereas now we have about 90% of the monitors are connectable to the internet without any external box. So we've seen a big shift in just the last couple of years, especially. So now, sort of part 2 is how to integrate digital signage into your business. I'm going to give you some simple steps here. And this is assuming assuming that most of you who are here, if not all of you here, are in the world of integrated digital signage, right? The first step is identifying who your clients are. Now, since 75% of you are already in digital signage, and this is probably a big-time review, however, it's probably worth mentioning that, believe it or not, all the clients you've been selling to for the last 15, 20, 25 years, depending on how long your company's been in business, those are all perfect targets for digital signage. All those same corporate clients you did boardrooms, conference rooms, training rooms, house of worships, and all those kinds of things in, all those kind of applications in, those are great potential clients for digital signage. Because what's happened is that people want access to information immediately. So maybe you put a boardroom in a manufacturing facility, and all of a sudden you go to them and say, by the way, I do digital signage. Now, you thought about putting corporate informational services in your lunchroom and changing your lobby display from being a static display, static sign, to being a dynamic sign that talks more about what your company does. And also wayfinding. The point is, if you will leverage the current clients, you don't actually have to go out and try to find new clients. There's probably enough current client business that exists in your organization for you to start a digital signage division if you haven't already. You yourself have to sort of decide what elements of digital signage you're going to go after. What is your marketing model for digital signage? So, for example, how many of you are in the digital signage world mostly, if not all, from the hardware standpoint? Meaning you're not selling software, you're not selling content services, you're selling the hardware and installing the hardware. Raise your hand. It's about 20% of you. So that's an okay model. There's money to be made there, right? You can still make money doing that. There's a cost for doing the integration. I mean, we sort of consider that hang and bang, but there's also, in a lot of cases, in the case of a university, for example, you may be deploying 100 signs simultaneously. That's a pretty big deployment. And then you've got to do all the programming and getting it on the network. So it's a little bit more sophisticated than you're just hanging a monitor up there. Of course, another model is also going after the content creation. How many of you actually have content creation services where you're creating creative content for the digital sign that's actually being displayed? How many raise your hand? Only 3 or 4 of you. Okay. For those of you who else are in here now, again, raise your hand if you're doing digital signage. Everybody? Okay. Now, only raise your hand if you're doing content services. These guys are the ones that make all the money. There's the margin. Okay, there's a tremendous amount of money in content creation. When you take a look at the life of a digital signage network, so let's say a typical life of a digital signage network without any changes to the network is 5 years. Okay, so you take a look at the life of a digital signage network. Over the course of that life, if they're changing the content only once a month, now I would say once a month is not often enough. There should be more than that, depending on the number of eyeballs. But let's say they're changing the content only once a month. If you took a look at that and you look back 5 years, the hardware and the integration service is going to equal between 3 and 5% of the total revenue generated from that network. So you're throwing away 95 to 90% of the opportunity if you're not doing creative. Right? So there's a huge opportunity in creative. Now, I know why most of you aren't doing creative. Most of you aren't doing creative because that's not the business we're in. We're in the business of hanging hardware and doing hardware services and stuff. However, it is the business we should be in because anybody can order a monitor off Amazon.com now. Best Buy can hang anything you want to get them to hang. So you can go to Best Buy, even if you didn't buy it from Best Buy, they'll charge you $150 to $250, and they'll hang it, they'll hide the wires in the wall, and they even now have corporate services that do that. There's a lot of competition for the hardware integration side, but the content creation side, there's not as much competition. So, what can you do? What could you do to get into the creative side of digital signage? Any thoughts? Anyone want to throw any ideas? Go ahead.
Yeah, you need graphic designers, you need guys that can handle
Or girls.
salads and understand media and media technology and streaming and
Right.
different types of content. Media.
Okay, so he's exactly right. You need graphics designers, okay? And you need people that understand visual communications. That's basically it. So, guess what? As you probably know, most liberal arts schools, certainly that have journalism schools and business schools, have graphic design majors, right? And a lot of technical schools have graphic design majors. What do you think graphics design majors do right now when they graduate from college? What do they do? working at a restaurant, right? They're not selling digital art. How many digital art galleries are out there? If they're working at all in the world of graphics design, they're designing websites, right? Which is massively uncreative. The problem with a website design is it doesn't change often enough for it to be creative. It's creative that one moment you get a new website, but then it becomes stagnant and static and then not creative again until you do a new website, right? What's that? Exactly, it does. It turns a maintenance job. Okay, so imagine being able to tell a graphics designer straight out of college, we're going to put you in charge of digital signage. You don't know anything about digital signage, but you totally understand how to make stuff look really good. And you understand how to match a corporation's color scheme with what we put on the digital signage to make it look good. And what's great about this is instead of designing websites or working at a restaurant, then you're going to be able to design digital signage networks, which we're not going to tell you how to design. You can be as creative as you want, just make sure it fits into the corporate philosophy of the customer, and you're going to be doing different ones every single week. So instead of doing a website once a month, or redesign once a month, you're going to be doing like a new project every single week, and then setting it up from the beginning so it can be maintained by the client or maintained by us so it can be changed as often as we want, and we can charge for that service. So, to get into the world of creative services, it only requires, there's really kind of two simple options. Number one is you hire a graphic designer right out of college. Start with one, then after that goes, okay, start, then hire a second one, then a third one, and so on and so forth. And you can build an entire department that way. And all graphic design programs in colleges are now teaching Adobe CS Suite, right? So they're now in CS6, I believe it is. So they're all teaching CS. And CS, the nice thing about Adobe's Creative Suite of services is that it is designed specifically to allow you to take the same content and displace it wherever you want, in any form factor you want, everything from print to digital, in any place, in any way you want. So you want to redesign, it's not like redesigning the wheel every single time. Alternatively, another option is, and a very simple, quick, easy, creative way of getting into doing the creative, and 75% of you raise your hand. So this is a way for you to automatically add, just by adding a line on your services. So now you're going to bid a digital signage display. I'm just encouraging you to add a line, creative services as a line, and then give them an hourly fee. All you got to do is talk to the Almo Pro AV reps or go to the booth here at the show, because Almo last month launched the creative services division that does all the creative for you. Meaning they hired a bunch of graphic designers, and they're just sitting there doing graphics design work, and they can do the initial work or the maintenance work or both. So it allows you, those of you who don't want to invest in a graphics designer, to pay by the hour, and if they're charging you whatever, let's say they're charging $150 an hour, you charge the customer $300 an hour, $175 an hour, $180 an hour, whatever you want to charge. You pick the margin that you want to charge. And I'm just kind of throwing out those numbers because I don't know what Almo charges. But I'm sure they're going to give you an hourly rate once they figure out what your project is, or a project-based rate. You just mark that up. It's an easy way for you to get into digital signage design and doing the creative side. Again, that's where the money is. So when you're doing the hardware and the content distribution, there's a decision that you need to make. Remember I said that the point was you figure out what model you want to use, right? We just talked about the creative services model. Another thing you have to decide is between, are you going to be self-hosting? Are you going to serve the content from your office? Or are you going to have the customer serve the content from a server that they buy and purchase? Or are you going to use software as a service? I would recommend using software as a service when you're starting out, because maintaining servers and maintaining content distribution servers is expensive, and companies like Adobe do that in their sleep, and you can use their cloud services as a monthly fee for that kind of stuff. And of course, all the content management systems also offer that as a service as well. So you'll see those on the show floor. So, point 3, sell the services. Don't just sell the hardware. Don't just sell the gear. Don't just sell the display, the media player, the cable, and the hang and bang aspect of it. Sell the service, not the gear. Sell the software as a service and or the creative content services. I've just told you a couple of different ways that you can do that. Another element of digital signage, which we haven't even really talked about, is the advertising element. So think about a company using digital signage. We've talked about how you can make money selling them the hardware, how you can make money selling the services and the creative. But now you can also work with that company to sell them on providing advertising as an opportunity for their digital signage network to pay for itself. So you can actually come up with a plan for a university, for example, that's going to deploy 100. If you had a university with 15,000 students, that's a lot of eyeballs. And you put digital signage in all the places that they walk every day. And you could show an ROI of 100,000 eyeballs seeing this on a weekly basis. Then you can come up with an ROI that's an advertising-based ROI through the university's current advertising contracts that they have with their current school newspaper. So that you go to the school newspaper and say, we're going to put a digital signage network in. Can you sell the ads, just like you are now for the school newspaper, could you sell the ads through the digital signage network to pay for the network in 4 to 6 months? So the advertising they would generate from that would pay for the network ROI-wise in 4 to 6 months. So then after that, the network will be free. So for those universities that are considering digital signage networks, you can actually use the advertising revenue model as a way to pay for the network up front. Now again, they're going to have to do some investment because it's going to take 4 to 6 months to do the recovery. But it works really well at universities where they have a school newspaper and they have ad salespeople who are already selling ads in the newspaper, right? Because then what you do is you just take the same content and turn it into creative content for a digital signage display. So don't throw away the opportunity or dismiss the opportunity of you being able to involve in advertising. Now, large universities like going to University of Florida or Florida State, that's going to be a tougher sell to make from an AV standpoint because they're going to have contracts with companies like Pepsi and Adidas and Nike and companies like that. And those companies are going to want to take over the display as an ad. They're not just going to want it to be like a little quadrant on the screen. They're going to want full screen ads playing on their content. So that'll be a different level of a contract you have to work with them.
Do you have any sources for really because that's the hardest part about determining ROI?
Yeah. There's a company called Fifth Screen Media. Fifth, like 5TH Screen Media. They're experts at this. And his name's Keith Kelson. And he writes about this, talks about this all the time. He's one of our writers for our digital signage publication. I mean, for those of y'all who don't know, we, in addition to having a Pro AV publication, we have a publication that aims specifically at the digital signage market. It's been around for, I think, 4 years. And all it does is talk about digital signage stuff. And he's one of the writers for that. And he can help you. There are all sorts of ROI calculators out there on the market where you can figure out sort of the mix of advertising you need to pay for a network. So ultimately, you have to decide which model you're going to use. Are you going to just be a hang and make provider? Are you just going to be a hardware provider? Are you going to be a software provider? Are you going to be a content service provider? But whatever you decide to use, make sure you're making money on the gear, you're making money on the services, and you're making money on the advertising. You don't have to jump in and do all three. If you're comfortable with just doing the gear side, just keep doing the gear side. But at some point in time, move into the content management side and move into the advertising and creative content side as well. Don't just stop at where you are now. And then make sure that it matches with your business goals and your client's business goals. One of the problems that you have in the world of digital signage is because it's digital, you have the ability to measure the metrics, and you can actually show ROI. Set it up in the beginning so that you have that capability of doing that, so that it becomes an easy sale for every other future network, because every past network can be used to generate a new network and be a great referral for that. So designing good content is a very tough part of the process. So let me give you some statistics actually from Fifth Screen Media. So this is from a November 2013 content survey. Asking people, when you encounter digital signage or digital out of home, that's the term used for any advertising out of home. It's basically digital signage. Screens. The content is, 55% of them said the content was mediocre. Okay? 35% of them said the content was good. But only 2% of them said the content was great. So we have a long way to go in the world of content. What's happened right now is the digital signage networks that we're deploying, we're taking static signage networks, turning them into dynamic signage networks, but using static signage design or dynamic networks. So what happens is, for example, we'll have a digital signage network and the sign will be the same for a month. And then they'll change it the next month, it'll be the same for a month. That doesn't work very well. What we have to do is have dynamic content, dynamic production of content, and again, that's where the money is as well. And there's all sorts of ways to set this up to automate the process through these CMS servers. So obviously, we have to fix that problem. Content quality is a big issue in our industry, yes.
Have you noticed that this has been my
Okay. Two great points there that are actually related, but also not related in a weird way. Okay. Europe is about 3 years ahead of the United States in digital signage. Okay. The deploying digital signage network. When you go to Europe, for those of you who are planning a trip to Europe this summer, or happen to be going to Europe summer, you're going to be blown away with where digital signage is. It is freaking everywhere. It's not just in retail places. Bus stops. It's in trains, every single train station. It's in the hotels all over the place. It's literally everywhere. They're 3 years ahead of us. They also, Europe, in an unrelated issue, we for years in the audiovisual world gave away design services for free. That's the model we chose to use. So what happened is systems integrator A and systems integrator B would be competing with each other for client A's business. And systems integrator A would design the A system, and systems integrator B would design A system, and then price the two systems, and then give the customer the design for free. So what happened is, if system integrator A liked systems integrator B's salesperson better, they would say, you know, I like system integrator A's project better, so why don't you just use their project, and I'll buy the stuff from you. You're all familiar with this. It happened for years and years and years. In fact, some 10 years ago, I started writing articles about how you guys got to stop giving away systems design, start selling for systems design services, even if you're not a consultant, right? I mean, consultants were doing it for years, but systems integrators were always giving it away. And then some systems integrators changed their names into design build firms, which basically meant we're going to now charge for the design and the build separately. In Europe, it never was that way. Europe never gave away the design services. It was always charged for it up front. So when they stepped into the digital signage market, it was easier for them to charge more and to say, this is the way we're going to do digital signage. You either buy it this way or don't buy it this way. And when we got into the market, we got into it as in, oh, you need digital signage? Sure, we can come into your office and hang a monitor in the lobby and hook up Signage to it. And that became like the beginning of a digital signage network, rather than looking at and sitting down with the customer saying, well, what exactly do you want to have accomplished? Because the customer doesn't really know. The customer's going to say, well, I want them to be able to watch TV. And they're like, anything else? And the customer's like, I don't know, I'll fix that. And as opposed to saying, well, because a lot of customers wouldn't say, like, well, what is anything else? And we aren't going to tell them what anything else is, because if we don't know how to do it, why would we tell them? Like, the last thing we want to do is say, well, you can have widgets, including AccuWeather here. I don't know how to do that, but I know you can do that. Like, that's not how we're going to sell something, right? So what happens is we went after the hardware business without really understanding the back-end software side of the business. So now, that doesn't mean us as in the whole industry. The audiovisual world only does about 20% of digital signage. 80% of digital signage is done by IT and ad agencies and people like that. People have just decided to skip our industry. That whole industry of people that are attending the show here, 90% of them have nothing to do with AV, and all of them are getting into digital signage. All of them are going to be your competitors, because they're all going to get into, all those static sign companies around the country are going to get into digital signage at some point in time. So to answer your Europe question, that's what happened. It was a combination of the way they've done systems integration for years allowed them to basically leapfrog the process that we use. The best analogy I can draw for you is the Scandinavian countries don't have wired phone lines, because when they decided to get phones, by the time they decided to get phones, wireless was already available. They're like, why would we do wired when wireless is available? So they started with wireless, the same kind of thing. They started with, we're going to charge up front for this. We're only going to do digital signage networks if we do the creative too. So sign up with us. You can't buy the monitor without getting the creative, but we still do both, and that's the reason. That answers your question. So it doesn't mean that we can't recover from this. There's a lot of, the whole ad agency side of the world that is doing digital signage is doing it this way. They're getting in it through the creative content, obviously, from the very beginning. 65% of the people in the world reported seeing digital signage networks at least once a week. 65%. We see them all the time. 39% reported seeing digital signage multiple times a day. So that's a lot of digital signage. That's a lot of signs that we're seeing all the time that are being deployed, and what we need to do is make sure that our content is effectively driving an ROI for the customer. And that's why what are the business objectives? You should really get in line with, when they're saying I need a digital signage network, they're not just asking for the hardware. They're asking for, how can you help me use a digital signage network to solve problems and also make me money, potentially, if they want that advertising side. So for a university, for example, it may simply be wayfinding is a big issue for them. They have a lot of visitors on campus, they want to be able to help them get around. It could be announcing all the things that are going on at the student union. It could be announcing all the athletic events. There's like 4 or 5 things like that we want to have. But they don't also know what the other opportunities are. If you said to them, well, what about advertising? They would be like, well, I didn't know you could do advertising. Or you could say something like, well, what about also having cameras around, taking all the cameras that are around campus and making them accessible through the digital signage network? Well, I didn't know that you could do that. It's stuff like that. They're not going to ask for that because it's hard to ask for something that you don't know you can do. Right? So unless you tell them it exists, they're never going to know it exists. That's one guarantee I can leave you with. If you don't tell someone something exists, they damn well aren't going to buy it from you. Right? So if you don't tell them all the services that are available, they're not going to get it from you. So we need really good creative content, and we also need to keep that content fresh. And basically what I mean by that is just, it's got to be changing constantly. It's static whenever it's not changing. So we need to make sure that we're not just converting static signage to digital signage that is static. We want to keep it changing. And that may mean hourly for some customers. That may mean daily for some customers. It may mean weekly for some customers, depending on the number of viewers. If you've got a lot of viewers, then it needs to be changing hourly. Because that means, especially if on a college campus where people are moving constantly, if they see the same content for 2 days in a row, they're just ultimately going to zone out and stop looking at the content. They're just not going to look at it anymore. If it's fewer people, like your doctor's, dentist's office, a restaurant, then maybe changing weekly is okay. I mean, I could just keep throwing out statistics for you. Do y'all know Kayye, the restaurant Kayye? Okay. Kayye sticks a dish. They have all digital signage menus, in case you haven't noticed. When you walk in, they have 2 vertical or 3 vertical menus sitting there. They stick a dish on there, and the time that the picture of that dish is on that sign, the sales go up 39%. When they take it off, the sales go down 39%. Like they put it on, it goes up 39%, take it off, it goes down. They can literally drive sales simply by sticking it on there because people identify with visual imaging. I mean, it's literally statistics that are that refined and detailed from that kind of stuff. So that's the reason why that's why you see all these fast food restaurants switching rapidly to digital signage networks, because they can drive inventory out when they need to get it out. So they're running low on fries, they remove the picture of the fries and they put on a picture of the hash browns. Or they want to push fish fillet because they got too many fish fillet in stock. All they got to do is put a picture there, and somebody who never even thought of ordering a fish fillet was saying, I should have fish fillet today. I mean, it sounds crazy, but never underestimate the intelligence of the American public. Yeah, or overestimate it, neither is. So, yeah, it works, and you're right, it does. I just happen to live in America, so I can make fun of Americans. So don't display all the content in the same month. Spread it out over the course of the month. Create a schedule. Know their campaign objectives. What are they trying to do? How are they trying to do it? And then give them some metrics to measure. The cool thing about all these content management systems is they got a tremendous amount of metric capability built into them. They can tell you everything that's going on. And of course, integrate social media. So for example, that's one way to make it interactive. Is when somebody tweets at the sign, all of a sudden their tweet appears there. And then it becomes more interactive because more people are playing with the sign that way. And sort of a way to play with it, but also it's a way to get people to interact with it, which means they're looking at it. If they're looking at it, that's eyeballs. If it's eyeballs, it means ROI. Of course, designing content now means you have to design it in high definition. You can't take clip art and put it into digital signage. You've got to literally start looking at designing. But you know what's neat about that? There's thousands of art, video, and image libraries that are out there, and some of them are actually free. Now, Getty, Getty Images, literally last month just said, oh, by the way, you can now use Getty Images for free as long as you link back to where the image came from. So now all the photos that they've been taking for years and years, they used to charge thousands of dollars for a single photo in some cases, hundreds of dollars for most of their photos. Now you can actually use their photos for free, as long as you're in videos, as long as you're linking back to the original or embedding the original source for the video. So there's a tremendous amount of content available out there, but you've got to have some person or group that is marrying that content together in the right type of an application. So the digital signage networks that really work really well are point-of-sale networks. We see this all the time in retail. You're familiar with that. Point of wait, where you're kind of sitting around and waiting, and you have nothing else to do. A lot of us, of course, pull out our cell phone and start reading our email, but even then, that becomes sort of boring, but if we can take our phone and interact with the display, that's another cool aspect of it, which you'll see on the show floor today. And then transit applications. These are three of the fastest growing parts of digital signage, simply because we've got a lot of eyeballs there and a lot of opportunity to sell stuff. And it's easy to sell stuff there. So hire the creative people. Consider doing what I suggested. Hire people straight out of college, graphic designers straight out of technical schools, or hire Almo and use their creative services group. They're going to tell you a little bit about it on the show floor up there. They have a booth, what I understand, specifically to talk about it. So it's a great opportunity. The opportunity is there, and we should definitely take advantage of it. Simultaneous to this digital signage growth happening, digital technologies are rising in quality, meaning the displays are just getting better and better and better, and decreasing in price. The average display has gone down considerably. We're now paying 30% of what we paid 3 years ago for a much better quality product. So the price has gone down significantly. You take a look at a 42-inch monitor, you're paying 30% of what you did 2 or 3 years ago, and you're getting a much higher quality product. One that uses less energy, it's brighter, more uniformly displayed, and it has better color imagery. So that means we can display a lot more signs in the same area for an affordable price. We don't have to spend as much money as we would have if we had started getting in the digital signage market 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's become, from a hardware standpoint, more commoditized. Screens, technology, software are becoming more affordable. The CMSs used to be separate entities where you pay a per-seat license. Now they're integrated into the cost of the whole CMS itself. The hardware and technology itself, everything's gone down in price, become more accessible, and that's making it where we can get in the business of managing those networks. And that's the fifth part of digital signage, is that managing the network piece. Fourth part, where you're actually able to manage the entire network itself and make sure that it's operational, and when there are problems, it's telling you that there are problems, and you become proactive with actually going out and fixing any potential problems. Because, the networks aren't perfect, right? They have network problems, but you also have hardware problems with displays every once in a while. And so, of course, we talked about the content creation and content management side of it, and you can also manage the advertising revenue stream through that network as well. So if you start from the beginning of setting up digital signage networks and networking, make sure that all your networks, even if it's a single display, network that single display so that you have control of it from your headquarters. That will allow you to manage the content, control the content, and ultimately control the network, so you become sort of their in-house AV company, which leads to recurring revenue streams. And that's what it's all about. The future of our industry is all about, yes, providing hardware is great, but having recurring revenue streams is the key, because what we want to do is we want to have the ability to have a client forever, right? And have them pay a monthly fee to us to make sure it's operational, and they'll be willing to do it, as I've said many, many times, to save their job. So they think about, from the standpoint of recurring revenue and service contracts, it's a simple sale if you can figure out a way to pitch this. You spend your company's money, a small amount of your company's money to save your job. That's a great win-win. Because of the network, think about it. If a CEO comes into a boardroom and something doesn't work, does he blame the remote control? Does he blame AMX or Crestron? No, he blames you, the AV guy. So if there's something wrong, the copier goes down, who do you blame? The copier guy, the copier company. It could be the network. It could be the button, the company that made the button on the copier, but you blame the copier guy, okay? So same thing happens. If something happens in the AV system, the AV guy gets blamed. So what you're doing for that AV guy, that in-house AV guy, is allowing him to spend his company's money to save his job. Because you're going to make sure the system is operational so that he never gets blamed for the system being down. So, any questions? I know some of the questions were asked as we went along, and I know that we want to get to the show floor and all the stuff that's out there. But ask any questions.
Why are we so far behind Europe?
Why are we far behind Europe? Well, if you go into a retail store in Europe, all the finishings are much higher quality than they don't have. Even the Walmart stores in Europe aren't the level of Walmart. Like their Walmart is starts at Target, right, and goes up from there. The finishings are much higher quality. The design, everything has sort of a design element to it. So when digital signage came along in the retail world, it became sort of a natural extension of what they were already doing. Everything is sort of a notch or two above, especially in the consumer retail space, than what we accept here in the United States. We're very much price sensitive, we're very much driven by price, we're very much driven by sort of the commodity aspect of it. It's just a fact. We are turning it around. We're turning it around now. I mean, parts of it were, like Walmart's Walmart TV network was the biggest digital signage deployment up until recently of all time. They pulled the whole thing out and they're reintegrating it now with all new system that is much higher end, much more capable of doing a lot more than it. So we're in the sort of phase 2 now. We're taking out, we started with phase 1. The good thing is now that those kind of companies know that they need digital signage and they're willing to pay money to upgrade to a better level of digital signage. But we're going to get there. I mean, the great thing is, and I guess the good message here, is that even though we're only doing less than 20% of the digital signage market, we're far from saturated. This market is huge growth potential, and even all the ones that have digital signage networks are all going to be upgrading their networks very rapidly. So it's all good news.
Yeah. The answer to this question, I think you already talked about it. We're giving away our designs for free.
Yeah, it's a big aspect of it.
The problem we have is that every time I go out there, I'm constantly saying to the customer, well, I'll put a design together for you and I'll charge you for it. But some guy will come along behind and say, no, I'll do it for free. And then that guy gets out there and gets a big bid, a competitive bid between 6 or 7 companies, and each one of them come up with their own design ideas. And then the customer will put together his own little package that doesn't make sense and say, this is what I want, and then they'll do it all wrong, and then we'll come and fix it later.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like you could build everything, you could build your own home if you really wanted to, but if you had a contractor that all they did was build homes, you're going to have a better built home. Doesn't mean the house you build yourself isn't going to hold up. It's just going to be better built. Everything's going to work better together. But the problem is we have to get to the level where everybody decides that the contractor's a better way of doing it. And yeah, I agree with you 100%. Stop giving away the designs, that will help. But it's hard to do that because you're afraid to lose a sale. And it's very hard for a salesperson to walk away from a bad sale, even though they know it's a bad sale. Any other questions? So I'll hang out here for a few minutes. This is my contact information. This is how to contact us online, all different ways to contact us. Make sure that you fill out the little cards that Almo gives you so you can be part of the prize drawing this afternoon. And back here this afternoon, we're going to do a panel discussion of a bunch of experts in digital signage, and you'll be able to ask any questions that you want. Thank you for the work.